What's up, guys? This is Jay here with Fantasy Labs, and I'm bringing you a quick video on cash games, specifically on FanDuel for this video, and kind of how I approach them using Fantasy Labs models, tools, and data. If you missed my video detailing lineup construction for tournaments, I can drop a link in this video after it's over if you want to check that out. Honestly, though, I'll probably forget to do that, so you guys might have to remind me, but this one will be about cash, so let's start things off kind of by breaking down what exactly constitutes a cash game in daily fantasy. In the simplest definition possible, I think cash games break down to either head-to-head games where you play versus one other person, which you can post in the lobby or take from the lobby, also known as scooping, or 50-50s and double-ups where you play a field and the top 50% get paid, or for double-ups it's a little under, top 45-ish% double their money. Double-ups are usually shark infested though, especially at this point, kind of in the season after that beginning stretch, and then they also have higher rake, but I'll get into that more later. So one thing I think every player needs to do, and I kind of brought this up in the tournament video, is to distinguish if you are more of a cash player or more of a tournament player. Of course, ideally you want to be great at both for both longevity and gaining maximum ROI kind of throughout your DFS career. So if you're just starting, I think it can be very helpful to focus more on one than the other. Me personally, I play a lot more of my majority of games in cash because I kind of have a cash game mentality, meaning it's easier for me personally to dissect optimal lineups and focus on optimal lineup construction. I think the best DFS player can juggle both cash games and tournament games every night, but that will come down the road, and that is a bit more difficult. So for the sake of this video, I'll be focusing on cash games on FanDuel and kind of illustrate how I construct my lineup. And if you're familiar with the industry, kind of the history, we have a lot of cash game players come and go. I think you can pinpoint some of the best cash players around. Obviously, CSU Ram 88 is one of them. Loves bases for MLB. Sawhill, of course. GCN Moo. Got to shout out my boy Birdwings, Chipotle Addict, Big Papa Gates, Hoop 2410, and there are many other guys who have been very successful at making a career out of cash games. And one of my favorite aspects of cash games is that you can study and emulate these professional players you can track their lineup each night throughout the season. So if you join a 50-50, for example, with a ton of DFS pros, you can aggregate their cash lineups and see who they are generally on throughout the season and basically reverse engineer their process. A lot of DFS cash game pros have admitted to even doing exactly that when either starting out or mastering different sports. You can see players in these 50-50s who might be over 50% owned between pros that you yourself missed, and then you can learn to correct any mistakes in your process. If you look at these lineups consistently, a lot of times there's a good amount of overlap in cash games, especially on FanDuel between the pros, meaning that there are very small edges. So you have plenty of strictly tournament players who kind of look at this and think cash lineups are very easy to build, but I think they're forgetting that the true skill is in identifying positive EV within these small differences in lineups. So here at Fantasy Labs, which you're looking at now, the model, we have the tools to maximize the EV in these cash games and gain that extra edge that I think will pay off huge dividends over time. You look at kind of the nature of MLB DFS, it's generally more difficult than some of the other sports, and perhaps it's more time dependent with the length of the season. But mainly it's due to the high variance on a nightly basis. So luckily, though, the season is long, extremely long. It's almost as long as the NBA playoffs alone, but it goes on that long. And I think you combine the length of the season with proper bankroll management and the proper tools, you can find success in cash games if your process is sound throughout the season. So with all of that said, let's go to FanDuel really quickly, and I'll enter some cash games. We only have 25 minutes, so we'll kind of see how the action moves. But I'll post a few games real quick to get some action out there, and we'll just do a couple games here and there and see what fills. And I'm doing this really late just to kind of illustrate the video. I'm not as much kind of breaking it down into my usual action or what games you should get in or what games you should post. I'm just kind of making this quickly, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in a dummy lineup just to get it out there. Jamil Weeks, he's not a solid play if you're wondering. Let's just go all DL guys, actually. The DL squad, something I don't recommend. Let's see. Okay, let's just get these out there real quick. By the way, this is something I strongly suggest you don't do. I only do it because I'm incredibly lazy and I have lapses where I turn into a giant donkey. So if there's one way to easily lose an already razor-thin edge in DFS, it's to go multiple nights in a row forgetting to replace your dummy lineup with your actual lineup. But the reason I'm throwing a dummy lineup in is because I want to get action before the slate starts. I'm already pushing it on time. I just kind of want to show you guys every step along the way. So let's go back to the lobby really quick, and I also will join a few 50-50s, and you can just kind of search 50-50 in the toolbar and sort by size, and you can gain enter whatever buy-in you want. Just kind of do this throughout the day to get in a bit more action, kind of spread your opponents around. This helps sometimes too. If you have a top 40% lineup and you do a similar amount of 50-50s and head-to-head, you're generally going to have a pretty solid night. So you should end up doing pretty well if you have a top 40% lineup in cash. You're not gonna sink or anything or blow your bankroll. And this what I'm doing, hoping for a top 40% lineup, even top 50% in these 50-50s. It's the exact opposite of tournaments, where if you have a top 40% score in tournaments, you're definitely getting swept. And getting swept is something we definitely don't want to do. It leads to poor decisions, like selling your MacBook for a Chromebook, for example, or taking a cab instead of using Uber. Just things that we generally don't want. So, I got in some games here and there, just a few. Let's finally head over to the goods on Fantasy Labs to build this cash lineup. We've gone in depth about what principles to use when constructing cash lineups for other sports, but I'll highlight a few that are kind of MLB specific. I think in cash and MLB, pitcher is by far the most important position. I generally always recommend paying up for a pitcher in cash. We are looking for a combination of a high floor and high upside, and the variance is just greater when paying up for elite hitters than it is elite pitchers. So you look at cash games as a whole, they're very simple in theory in that we are looking for optimality in each decision you make in your lineup. So for each position, for example, we're essentially looking for the most favorable degree using statistics and data for obtaining that positive result. So of course there are little intricacies and edges we can find during the lineup construction process, so it's not as simple as it may appear on the surface, but luckily with Fantasy Labs these edges are a whole lot easier to distinguish. So as you can see, I have the CSU RAM 88 model up because we are fortunate enough here at Fantasy Labs to have arguably the best cash game player in DFS grace us with his personal model. So I'm going to use this one for the purposes of this video, and I also use this model a lot when building my cash lineups on any given night. So I'll kind of start position by position really quick and show you just briefly how I kind of create my cash game lineup. You look at this slate as a whole and it shapes up a little differently in that we have a plethora of aces to choose from. The top one being Clayton Kershaw, who has a salary so high he makes Wiz Khalifa jealous. So it's a little bit of a different slate to kind of do an example on because that's the highest salary pitcher you can possibly have. So it makes it a bit different in strategy with the remainder of your lineup. But I'm not overthinking anything on this slate. Like I said, I always recommend paying up for pitching. So I'm going to go ahead and lock Clayton Kershaw in my cash lineup. And as you can see, my remaining salary per player drops significantly right here. So I'm fine with this though because of the importance of selecting a pitcher with a high floor as well as high upside. So let's keep it moving and go on to catcher using this model, and you can see right away we have a bunch of cheap options. There are guys I like here. I like Gaddis quite a bit. More probably of a tournament play though, however. He's been smashing in the minors, coming back, facing Carlos Rodon. I like quite a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and use Chris Herman, the top-rated guy in this model. We're looking for guys who offer salary relief, have a favorable spot in the lineup, have an easy matchup. All things again for optimal cash plays. Herman gets to hit in the 2-hole tonight for the Diamondbacks against Michael Pineda. You can see his splits are very positive against righties. And then if you scroll over actually to the advanced stats that we have, the advanced data, you can see that his batted ball differentials are very, very positive there. So overall, I think not too much of a reach to play Herman in cash. I think he'll have decent ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and lock him in. And really quick before I move on, I kind of want to bring, after just going through catcher, positional scarcity and kind of the options that you have when approaching this topic. On normal slates, again, this isn't really a normal slate too often because you're spending $13,000 on a pitcher, but you're going to have decisions to make on the weaker positions on average, which are usually catcher and middle infield, meaning second base and shortstop. So generally, you can either punt at these positions and spend elsewhere because these positions are lacking, or you can pay the premium on these positions and kind of get that top guy at these positions and find value as on the deeper positions. So this differs for me slate to slate, but typically I find myself saving money at catcher and shortstop on average. For this slate, though, we kind of have to save pretty much everywhere with the exorbitant price of Kershaw. So let's move on to first base really quick. On this slate, one thing you'll notice is I like getting exposure to Mike Pelfrey because you don't need to say too much. He's Mike Pelfrey. He does not have good stats. He's not a great pitcher. So I like looking at Joe Mauer quite a bit here at just 2,700. You kind of look at the top tier, and the prices are pretty expensive for what we're looking for. So Mauer stands out to me quite a bit at 2,700, positive splits, and affordable salary. So I'll go ahead and lock him in as well. And then let's go on to second base, which is tough. And again, this is the middle infield thing. We have some guys. Obviously, I like Jose Altuve at the top quite a bit. And then you kind of look down, and this is a position I think I really want to save money at. So I'm going to go all the way down, and the model doesn't really reflect him highly, but I'm looking at prices more than anything after rostering Kershaw. So I'm actually going to lock in Howie Kendrick, hitting leadoff on this slate against Jared Weaver. I don't mind Dodgers' exposure on this slate. So with the cheap salary and favorable lineup order, I'm fine locking him in as a way to save money. Moving on to third base, using the model you see, I think we have two pretty strong options, Jorge Polanco and Trevor Plouffe, both very affordable, again, both facing Mike Pelfrey. I'm going to go with Jorge Polanco. He has a better splits and is a tad bit cheaper. I'm kind of trying to squeeze all the salary I can get on this slate, so I'm going to go ahead and lock Jorge Polanco, who again shows up highly on models and is affordable. Let's keep going. Shortstop. Shortstop for me on this slate was actually very tough. I think it was the toughest position, kind of breaking down the slate. I don't really have a realistic possibility with the money remaining to pay up at shortstop. So I'm going to go ahead and punt short and take a guy who I think has a good amount of home run upside, Javier Baez. As you can see, he's just 2,200 as well. So I think you're looking at some significant salary relief there. I do like getting exposure to the Cubs against Anderson in this one. So the Cubs are implied to score the most runs on this slate. So I think it's important in cash to kind of get exposure to these teams that are more than likely going to score a lot of runs. So let's go ahead and lock Javier in and move on to the outfield. So for the outfield, first guy I'll lock in, I'm going to go ahead. I brought this up on the pod last night, is target Matthew Joyce. I was actually having a really good season. Great pickup for the Pirates there. Has a lot of home runs and very limited at bats coming through big for them. Has good splits against righties. So I'm going to go ahead and lock in Matthew Joyce. He's just 2,500, facing a pitcher who really struggles to find the strike zone. And as you can see, Joyce has very positive splits against righties. And this is because Starling Marte is still on the paternity list. So Joyce was a guy I was looking at the night before, kind of hoping that he would hit. I would have preferred him to hit cleanup, but I'm fine with him hitting 6th at that price. Another guy I'm looking at in outfield is Miguel Sano. Again, it's no secret. You can see this lineup already shaping up that I'm targeting Mike Pelfrey. So, you look at a guy like Sano hitting 3rd in the lineup. I fully expect the Twins to score a healthy amount of runs in this game. So Sano makes for a pretty easy play at a pretty discounted price point. I'm fine. I have some money. You can see I have money remaining. And what I'm going to do with this last 3,700 is actually get some Tigers exposure, who are tied with the Cubs in current implied points runs. So I'm going to go ahead and use this on J.D. Martinez. Again, I like getting exposure to these teams that are in good situations. I wouldn't feel great about myself if I had 0 Tigers in cash. So at the 2-hole, implied to score 5 runs. I'm going to take JD Martinez, and that fills out the lineup. I have 100 remaining. So let's go ahead and really quick import this lineup so I don't lose my Sour Patch Kids money, which was something I think I probably would have done since I'm kind of rushed here on time and the slate's starting soon. So we'll just go to any game upcoming and just edit and import to all. So let's go ahead and throw this lineup in. We got Kershaw, so definitely spending up at pitching, which is something he has 2 R's. Right, there we go. And first base, I need to refresh on this lineup. Mauer, Kendrick, Polanco. Okay, so most of you won't have to do this because you're smart enough to not throw in an absolute donkey dummy lineup, but you know, this is something that I have to live with on most nights, unfortunately. So I just put it in after and then export the lineup to all my contests. Hope that I get it in time, of course, is kind of the big thing. So let's go ahead and have that in, and we'll save changes and go ahead and export. And as you can see, you know, I'm not getting too many games taken. We still have a little bit of time. I might probably join a few more 50-50s. So let's go ahead and export these 12 entries. So we got those lineups in. So overall, you know, looking at this lineup, I have a lot of lefties. You know, well, if you count Kershaw, I guess, Polanco, switch. So I'm taking advantage of splits, kind of outside of Javier Baez, who again is the one position I'm punting. I'm paying a premium for Kershaw, kind of fully expecting him to pay off his salary, which you know, I think he will in this matchup, especially with his high floor, which again I really like targeting in cash. I'm hoping that some of these value hitters come through in optimal spots to give me a well-rounded cash lineup. So once again, I'm looking for security and a high floor when I play cash. So with the variance of hitters, it's so high. That's kind of why I always gravitate towards paying for elite pitching. Look at a guy like Andrew McCutchen. He can go 0 for 5 in a good matchup. Sorry if that's too soon for you guys, but he can go 0 for 5 just like Hector Sanchez can go 0 for 5 versus Bumgarner. So with the variance with hitters, I always look for in cash to target safe pitchers, whether their price point is very high or not. You look at a guy like Kershaw, he has a very safe floor. He's 10 strikeouts, I think, in 5 or 6 games in a row. So breaking this down, cash is just far different than tournaments, which is also why I recommend you have a different model for each. You really want to weigh various factors that relate to each separate strategy, and I do think they're very, very different strategies with cash and tournaments. And of course, you can do all of these things by using the tools at Fantasy Labs. So I hope you guys found this video informative, and I'm going to close a hard day of work with some Mario Kart. So what better way to end the day? If you guys have any specific questions about cash games, definitely don't hesitate to reach me on Twitter at DoppelSykes. If you think you might be more of a cash game player but are playing significantly more tournaments, you know, maybe it's time to come over to that cash side. Thanks for watching. I'll have more videos for you guys in the near future, breaking down strategies, offering tips here and there. So good luck, guys, on this slate, and I'll have another video for you soon.